This is Diablo 4, Vessel of Hatred. We're here on Xbox Series X. Be sure to like the video, subscribing is great as well. This is the first expansion for Diablo 4, the first of what I'm assuming are many expansions in the years to come, and hopefully I'll be taking a look at those and we'll continue to see this game evolve over time. When the title initially released, I was pretty blown away by it. I found it to be a natural evolution and growth for the Diablo franchise as it moved towards an experience that was focused on a multiplayer integrated setup and scenario. I was very lucky to be able to take an in-depth and early look at the game and see the full scope of what this expansion has to offer. And yeah, it's kind of great, as I was sort of expecting. It's certainly that experience that you might be familiar with in terms of narrative gameplay and style. There is a little bit of a harder twist to it all in terms of difficulty, mostly with the bosses, which can have pretty lengthy and at times daunting scenarios. But at the same time, that very likely is also due to the fact that I created a brand new character in order to dive in and enjoy what this story had to offer, which was the recommended way to tackle this scenario here. You may have kind of noticed that I am playing as the new class, which is the Spiritborn class, which is based around acrobatics and the usage of a couple out of, I think it's 4 elemental type spirit things that are basically powers that you draw from, including this really cool centipede-like creature thing that pops up there. So yeah, you may notice some elements of the experience aren't fully functioning here, and that's because it is, again, a specific early review build. Something I haven't really seen on Xbox too often. Like this is actually the most unique review build I've seen on the console platform, so bravo to Blizzard for putting this together. Seriously, I haven't seen anything like this specifically, which is fascinating. And yeah, so, you know, for example, my horse mount doesn't, like, I can't get a mount, so I had to walk everywhere, which, lot of walking, because we actually have a fairly large new area to explore in the game. So I got to level, what did I get up to? 46 here by just working through the story content here. For context, here's the regular world. It just gives you an idea of sort of the areas you visit. This specifically, which to me is kind of like a new continent's worth of area, is something that we came to enjoy and dive into for this story. So the narrative itself actually feels pretty lengthy. I do feel like you'll probably move through it a little quicker if you're bringing an established character, or if you are sort of, I guess you would say, working with others, or you know what I mean, going through second run as well for this. I think you'll have a speedier time. But it is, to me, a relatively vast and lengthy setup, which will give you more of the content I think you might have enjoyed with the initial release, the Grimdark Tale. It basically just continues the events of where the story ended, which was what I kind of predicted was going to happen. The story is very much centered around Neyrelle, who was a central character in the core game, and now she is very much the focal point of the setup. Her battle between basically herself and the darkness of the spirit of the Soulstone of Mephisto, who is taking a much, much larger antagonist role this time around. Obviously, Mephisto was like a big part of Diablo 4's main story, but you know, that narrative was mostly Lilith, and this is very much focused on Mephisto and his sort of battle for longevity and existence, as to say, right? You get what I'm talking about. So for this one, we're a little bit more focused on the gameplay, reviewing the DLC itself, graphically you know, things haven't changed from like the last time they did an update to this game. So it very much is a visual experience that is as similar, if not the same, to like what you had prior in terms of like visuals and, you know, the 60 FPS and everything like that. And then you can have enhanced visuals, and the choice is up to you. I didn't really feel it was necessary to dive too much into like the visual technical details. You kind of would have seen that if you've seen my reviews or videos on the game. We're very much focused on talking about the expansion and what it has to offer gameplay-wise, which I think is the important thing when doing this type of video personally. But, you know, of course, let me know, and I'm assuming that this is something I might get invited to do in a year from now when another expansion drops, because I would imagine this is going to be probably a 10-year game if I had to take a stab at it. I'm assuming we're going to get a big expansion every year, and I welcome it if they're at the quality of this, because this was pretty spectacular. You get to visit an array of new areas across the landmass that is Nahantu, which gives you mostly like a jungle type of scenario and area. So you get to visit some really viney, jungly places with some grotesque monsters that are very much something that you would expect are as staples of the Diablo franchise. And then also some different areas that might surprise you. Some beautifully majestic waterfall locations, a bit of a plains area with some light grass, and very, very beautiful setups and scenarios that you could enjoy. And of course, your usual dungeons and strongholds and creepy crypts and unsettling places of flesh and bone and, you know, the usual grim, dark, depressing Diablo setups that you are probably used to if you played the main game. Tonally, this game and this expansion, it's dark, it's creepy, it's unsettling, it's grim. That's what you expect out of Diablo, at least specifically for Diablo 4, particularly with the tone of the main game. If you do have questions about the main game, I do suggest checking out my review of it. I think it still covers the full scope of it pretty well. And this is, as I had mentioned, very much focused on the expansion. What the Vessel of Hatred has to offer for you. So, we talked about the element of this area. So, like, the space is impressively large, like I mentioned. There's lots of little spots you can go to, and I tried to explore everything I could and, you know, show it off to the best of my ability. Obviously, there are so many areas, and of course, as you are to level and or do harder difficulties, you get up to a tier 1, as to say, you'll get even cooler spots. So, like, a big part of that was the, I guess you could call it the dark Dark Cathedral. Anyways, like, it's a place where you're doing sort of endgame looting and, you know, battling and stuff. And for a quicker scenario that's more available readily and you don't have to do a lot of, like, difficulty working towards, is the, it's called the Crossed Undercity. So that's an area where they literally note that it is recommended to go there to, like, farm gear and sort of do general item and, like, level farming is that area. So that's another place that's sort of built around the idea of giving you more long-term areas that you can repetitively work through, because that's a lot of the dungeon crawling and elements of Diablo, are that you are kind of grinding and working through the areas. Not a bad grind, but a grinding gameplay loop that you enjoy. So if you can't get enough of the game, the whole idea is this sort of dark area and the Crossed Undercity. The idea there is those places are meant for more deeper levels of long-term grinding and item allocation, if that makes sense. So, or fighting for items and trying to collect items. You get what I'm talking about. If you play Diablo, you know exactly what I mean. For the more casual audience person out there, that might be something that is a little confusing, so I just thought I'd kind of dive into those to the best of my ability. And I think this is actually like a pretty good onboarding place if you're kind of like interested in Diablo 4. Again, the main review is right there if you want to know about the main game. But I think just in terms of like seasonal content, changing the game up, updating it, improving things here or there, this is actually a really great onboarding point if you've kind of been, I guess you would say, a little curious about the game, or maybe you weren't totally captured by the idea of it. Now is like a really good time to get into what Diablo 4 has to offer. Every expansion for most games usually is, so I thought that was worth kind of noting there. So, like a big change to the game is the addition of this new class. So that is obviously something I wanted to highlight, and when we had the opportunity to start fresh, like none of my stuff carries over everything, like this is basically just a temporary character build and everything like that. So I really did think it was great to get an opportunity to be forced into checking out this new class. So we've got Scornful here, a Spiritborn, and if we take a look at the skill tree, we'll start with the beginning here. It's 4 segments, so we've got sort of a like a spirit kind of bird thing, a claw thing, a poison thing, and then a kind of rock thing. And you see how those kind of evolve over the different scenarios and setups. I went with more of a wind and kind of poison type build, as to say. And I am assuming long-term people are going to have much better build setups than what I have going on here. But again, it's just kind of playing through it to do the story and give you an idea of the game and everything like that was kind of the main goal. So another big change up here is the new kind of like socketing thing. I didn't seem to get more. You kind of craft them. So they're called rune words. So this is like a gear type elemental thing that you would socket into your certain armor types and scenarios in order to make things a little bit stronger. And it kind of feeds into the whole, I guess you would say, enhancement elements of weapons. So if you go to like you can kind of slot them in, you know, when you get them and stuff. But if you go to a blacksmith, there are socketable things and elemental type impacts. So that is sort of a new layering to the loot system and to the gear system that's supposed to change up how you do your battling, and they just add extra little elemental things. There's also the system of mercenaries. So there's a few different mercenaries here. I have Ray here, who is kind of the first initial mercenary you get. You can also have a reinforcement. So reinforcement will be like something that gets triggered by an ability, and then mercenaries, you like hire them and they'll fight with you, and you have a skill system with them. You also have report, which is unlocking cool little items and stuff that you get over like bonding with them and whatnot. So the mercenary system was something that was kind of cool. I think I sort of, when playing, honestly, kind of overlooked the mercenary system, because it was, they gave a good amount of time to play this, but I also was like really pressured, and I just, you know, obviously working on a lot of stuff. So I kind of overlooked the element of having like literally a mercenary with me, and I was mostly just kind of going at it solo and just using the reinforcement, and I really should have used a mercenary. So I think a mercenary is a very good, helpful option if you are essentially playing like by yourself and don't have like pals with you and stuff. The mercenary system is very helpful, because like I was struggling with some of the bosses. Like, as I said, if you're looking for a bit more of a challenge, particularly if you want to like tackle like a hard difficulty or whatnot, or higher, because obviously there's bazillion levels of difficulty in Diablo, if you know that. I'm trying to make myself look good here on the regular one, but but you know what I mean, right? The element of Diablo, like the whole point of Diablo is like, yeah, great story, gorgeous cinematics, great gameplay, but it's the addicting loop of gear, difficulty, and grinding new items and things along the way. And that level of like being able to repetitively play it while never getting bored of the concept, that's the strength of like kind of Diablo, at least from my perspective. And this game is so chock full of things that kind of like lean into that really well. But mainly that's what I was trying to get across, is that, like, if you are more hardcore, this expansion really does lean into that. If you're like a regular player, there might be a little bit of a, like, and I don't know how much things are going to balance and change too, because you got to remember, this is like really far out of the way before, and I haven't even seen this orb thing. I was expecting to be done this dungeon by now. This is really expansive. Yeah, there are these elements of kind of like some of the boss battles have like multi tiers going on, and that can make some of it a little, I guess you would say, daunting in the sense that, like, especially as you get towards the end. So I could see how some people playing by themselves would maybe have a little bit of difficulty with some of the scenarios, but I think the more veteran players will probably welcome the challenge. But if you are more of a veteran player, I think you'll also be in for a bit of a pleasant surprise by the skill difficulty that is present when you are playing at those harder difficulty tiers. But that's where I was saying kind of the mercenary system is something that's worth like investing into. And as I mentioned, there are a few different mercenary options that are present that you can enlist to help you out. So there actually is quite a lot going on in that aspect of it. So I like that system. I thought it was kind of neat and interesting gameplay-wise. So that's kind of like the core foundations of the scope of this one. The idea here is to give you something that is a natural continuation of the game. So if you're like again, I'm kind of thinking of it long term. Like, to me, this story here is exactly what I assumed would happen when we concluded the game, like the main game there. You know, where the story kind of ended off, where the characters ended off. This was exactly where and how I thought things were going to go. I thought it was pretty blatantly set up in regards to the main characters. The fact that Nayrel was going to be a big focus here. I wasn't surprised in the slightest what happened. I did think the journey was really interesting, especially the element. And again, like, I'm not gonna like spoil things for you, but I'm gonna lightly touch upon elements of the story to kind of talk about like the scope of it and where you go. Like the main focus here very much is on Nayrel and her journey into this forest area, and then, well, it's more of a deep jungle with like ruins, lost ruins in areas. But the journey itself is very personal. We get to really dive into her character. It also dives into the existing aspects of what just happened, the aftermath of the battle where we went into the fiery depths below, and, you know, had that big war, and we, you know, interacted and dealt with Lilith, and the whole Mephisto reveals and aspects of that. And this very much feels like a natural continuation. And that's where I'm saying, like, I think from a long-term perspective, when people are going to be like playing this down the road, I do believe that this will literally just feel like a step of the story, if that makes sense. You wouldn't necessarily feel like it is a self-contained expansion. You feel like this is sort of a direct continuation of what we had prior. And I think that's good from a storytelling perspective, where it's like you literally, the level and the quality of the experience is so good that it is exactly on par with the main core, like, setup. You know, we've got these gorgeous cinematics that obviously Blizzard is known for, which are just, like, simply stunning visuals, and the deep dive into, like, the characters and stuff, and the darkness of it is fantastic. See, this is what I'm saying, some of these bosses are just, like, you know, a little bit more daunting. Like, this is actually, like, a pretty easier setup, this one, but it just kind of gives an idea of, like, some of them can be, like, really lengthy. This was honestly a bit of a shorter kind of setup compared to some of the others I've been doing. But yeah, that's the setup here. It's a natural progression. Like, it doesn't feel like its own... Oh, that actually clears the dungeon for it. Great. Leave dungeon. So it doesn't feel like some kind of weird, out-of-the-way thing. It feels like a natural progression, continuation of the system. So if you're playing, like, say there's 5 expansions from now over 5 years, which is crazy to think about, but, you know, time goes by faster than you think. And you were to kind of come in here, you would very much think that this is just part of the story, which is great. Like, it doesn't feel like some weird self-contained thing. It feels very naturally like it pushes forward the game and the narrative and the setup and the characters and everything like that. Like, I think a lot of lingering questions get expanded upon. I think it sets some interesting stakes. I think it sets and pushes the narrative forward in a way that is probably interesting and exciting for the current fan base. Like, if you were sort of wondering, you know, what did happen to that holy order that we sort of, you know, kind of had a bit of an interaction with that maybe caused some problems for them long term. We get to see how that plays out. We get to see what happens with Nayrel and her story in regards to how she's dealing with the crystal and Mephisto being part of this soul stone. And then you also get to see how other characters have been handling things, and, you know, some of your favorites, and then you get the continued narrative story development. It's great from a perspective of, like, starting a new character and jumping in and doing the story specifically from a starting point and not feeling too out of place or weirdly out of the way for it. And then for existing players and characters, you sort of get onboarded really easily into the experience. And yeah, I mean, I hope this kind of really conveyed the full scope of this well. As I said, time was tight. I did get through all the narrative and everything like that. I took a look at the scope of things, and we were also quite limited too in terms of, like, the full everything working 100. Like, there's no performance or technical problems, if that's what you're kind of wondering, but, like, obviously not having a mount made it a lot harder to get around, and, you know, that's not going to be an issue for regular players or certain elements here or there. So it's not exactly like I got to experience the full regular version of the build that you will, and I hope just, like, if you are noticing anything odd about, like, my character build and stuff like that, just do keep that part of it in mind, because I was trying my best to kind of set up this new character and work through this and play this and, you know, get all the bosses finished and get this all wrapped up in a way that allowed me to review this experience and showcase and talk about it. And I had a great time. Like, I was a little stressed out by some of the bosses being a little bit more difficult than I had anticipated, but had I played this with, like, my usual character, or in a situation or setup which was typical for me Diablo-wise, I think I would have, you know, kind of not really struggled at all with those things. Like, it was funny, like, one boss I was sort of having troubles with, and then I found someone else that was, like, reviewing this, and, like, they came in, and within 2 seconds, we just, like, smoked it. And I had a good laugh about that, and I was like, okay, it's just, like, my build isn't, you know, because that is the big part of Diablo, like I've mentioned, is the grinding and the building of your character. And could you please just help me out here, right here? I'm trying to go over here to show this off, like, obviously, this is an expansive, chunky review because it's an expansive addition to the game. I think the hardcore Diablo fans that have been craving more gameplay are going to love what this has to offer. I think you're going to be really excited about what this experience is. I think from a story perspective, it's great. It's a lot of fun. I think from a perspective of someone wanting something new within this game or wanting to onboard to this game at this current point in time, I think you'll have a really, really good time with it. And I think it just really offers something that is visually quite beautiful. I love the kind of change, too, where it's not just all sort of those heavy CGI cinematics. Like, that, I mean, that makes it sound so bad. But you know what I mean, compared to actually having some really beautifully designed in-game cinematics that sort of focus on your character and show off the beauty and the details of your design character and your armor and the way you kind of look with the different pieces you have of, like, you know, weapons and you know, armor, basically, yeah, the different pieces of your character. And you get to see that in sort of these epic in-game kind of cinematics. I thought that was really well done, a nice sort of change up. At least something I don't really recall too much being part of, like, the main story in this one. But yeah, more crazy world events, more adventures to have alone or with other people, or with your friends cooperatively. I think they did a great job with this expansion. I was really happy to play it. I was very, basically just very thankful that I got to take a look at it early and actually had enough time to sit here and kind of experience what it had to offer and report on something ahead of the actual release so that you could get an idea of things. They did a great job here. You know, I don't know. Maybe to some degree, I'm like one of the party that's gonna like this more than others because I love the core game so much. but I think you'll have a great time playing Vessel of Hatred. I think you'll definitely have a wonderful time with it, although maybe a little bit more of a difficult time than usual. But I think it's a great time. I had a lot of fun with it, and I'm looking forward to streaming through it again so that I can play it with my regular character. Should be a great time.